What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the Fish House. Today's video is going to be a beginner's introduction to bait casters, the different styles, pros and cons, setting them up, and how to cast them correctly. So why choose a bait caster over a spinning reel? They cast further, they're more accurate, in my opinion they're more ergonomic, they handle bigger lines, bigger baits, and in turn bigger fish. What are the cons? They tend to be more expensive, there's a steep learning curve with using them, and bird's nests or backlash, of course. I'll go over what that is in a little bit, but first let's go over the different styles of bait casters. In front of me I have a few of the most common styles. Each one has a different braking system. I'll go over each type briefly, but we're gonna focus on one in particular. In my opinion, it's the easiest to learn with. First, this is a digital chip version from Shimano. This has a digital chip inside that monitors the spool speed and adjusts braking during the cast. It does all the work for you, but they're a lot more expensive, and because of that, I feel like it's not a great starter reel. Second, this one from Abu Garcia has a magnetic braking system. There's a dial here on the side that adjusts by turning it clockwise or counterclockwise. Very simple. All the way to the right, less braking. All the way to the left, more braking. Finally, these two use magnetic braking and centrifugal braking. If I open up the faces on these, you can see that one has a dial on the spool that strengthens the centrifugal braking, and the other has pins that you click in or out to do the same. These are more accurate in casting the magnetic only types, but they take a little while to get used to and set up. They also tend to be more expensive than magnetic braking because of the more complicated braking system. I'm going to be using the Abu Garcia with just magnetic braking as my example because it's the cheapest, and besides the digital chip, it's the easiest to use out of all of them. Let's go over how to set them up. There are a few different ways people set these up, but I find the way I'm going to show you works the best all around for every manufacturer. On the side here is the spool tension knob. This adjusts the preload on the spool bearings and affects the last part of your cast. If I release the spool, put my thumb on it, and move the spool side to side, you can hear a clicking noise. When I'm setting up the spool tension, I want to move the spool back and forth and slowly adjust the tension knob until I don't get any more side to side movement and I don't hear any clicking. Adjusting this too tight can cause damage to the reel itself, so any adjustments outside of this initial one should be very minimal. I'll go over that a little bit more when we're out casting this. Now, one thing you need to know about bait casters is they're designed to cast much larger and heavier baits. Something like these work great, while these other ones are too small and light, and you won't be able to cast them well at all. There are some companies that make finesse bait casters designed to cast these lighter lures, but they're so niche I'm not going to recommend one since a small spinning reel will do the same job. Alright, I'll go over setting this up one more time and how to cast them when we get out to the lake. See you there. Alright, we're out here on the lake. We're ready to go. We got the bait tied up, we got spool tension set, we got the magnetic brake system turned up to 11. Most of them go up to 10, but this one goes up to 11.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
Anyway, a few things before you start casting. So first of all, you need to release the bail, or release the spool, excuse me, and you're gonna have your thumb resting on the spool, because if you don't, your bait's just gonna drop. So release the spool, keep your thumb on there, and before I cast, I'm gonna go over two things that you need to watch out for. When you're casting, you need to feather this spool and line. If you start to feel too much line coming out, you can use your thumb to feather that. And by what I mean is you're going to leave your thumb just barely above the spool and the line spinning. And when you start to feel line touching your thumb, you press down a tiny bit. And I mean like tiny bits. Like maybe as much as thick of the as thick as the line is, that's as much as you're going to be moving your thumb. And then the last thing is right before the bait hits the water, you need to stop the spool completely with your thumb. Otherwise, line is going to keep on coming out. You're going to bird's nest. All right, so one more time. click down the button, release the spool, keep your thumb on there, bring back your cast, whip it out, feather the spool, sorry, then stop the bait before it hits the water with your thumb. As far as setting up the braking system, whether it be centrifugal or magnet or a mix of the both, more is always better than less, especially when you're starting out. It's going to reduce your bird casts a lot. This size bait and this cranked all the way up, you actually don't even have to feather at all, so you could get used to just casting and stopping the spool before it hits the water. You're not going to get very far casts, but bird's nesting is not fun, and reducing the amount that happens is preferable over sitting there trying to untangle a line. So see if I can show kind of what my finger is doing with the feathering. Let's see if I can get a good look on this. That's all I'm doing. Just, if you saw, my finger's just kind of moving. Every time I felt the line start to kind of come out too fast, I'd give it a little bump, and then it slows it down and sorts itself out. So I guess I should talk about casting technique a little bit. If you don't cast correctly either, you're gonna bird's nest. You want to feel that bait load up your rod and then fling it forward and use all that energy that's been stored up in the rod to flip your bait out further. It's not your arm doing the casting, it's the rod. So load up, flick it out there. It seems like a better idea to lob the bait out there by getting as far back as possible, like bringing it all the way back and then going like all the way forward and just lobbing it out. But with bait casters, I find a baseball throw works a lot better than an overhead. And you kind of just want to be flicking your wrist. There's not a whole lot of arm movement. It's all going to be mostly in the wrist, and you're just going to flick at the end there. Okay, so I'm going to simulate a bird's nest. I'm going to make a bird's nest. That way I can show you guys how to undo it. So let's make a bird's nest. There we go. We have a bird's nest now. See all the lines all messed up? So to undo this, what you're going to do is you leave the spool open after clicking the button, and just pull the line out. Keep your thumb kind of on the spool to guide it out, but here we go. This is perfect. So you get to this spot where you can't pull out anymore and you still have a big bird's nest. So what you're going to do is you're going to put your thumb on the spool hard. You're going to crank up your drag really heavy, and you're going to turn in that bird's nest. It seems counterproductive, but it will get rid of it. So you do that a few turns, and then you go back to pulling out the line manually, and most of the time that will undo those knots. And there we go. There we go. We got that knot undone, and just keep on pulling. Keep your thumb on the spool and just keep pulling line out until you've got the bird's nest out, and there we go. We no longer have a bird's nest, and you can just put the line up there. Oh, there's a little bit more of there's one more little loop. Get that out before you go in completely, but there we go. Bird's nest done. Then just hold the line and crank in, and there you go. That's how you undo the bird's nest. That trick works really well for most everything. Braid, it doesn't work so well. Braid, when it bird's nests bad. So as a starter, like I said, just use mono or fluorocarbon. Yeah, that is it. That is how you use a bait caster. Once you are comfortable with them, you'll love them. They cast so much further. It's, in my opinion, a much easier reel to hold. It's more ergonomic. They look cool, and you'll look cool doing it. So here's a little tip here. If you are casting out and you're starting to get bird's nests in the first half of the cast, that means you need to turn the brakes up. If you're getting them on the last half of the cast, you need to turn the spool tension up, but I can throw this bait right over that mountain.
How much you want to make a bet I can throw a football over them mountains?
I have a bunch of stupid pop culture references in this video. Man, where's that big guy that was chasing after this earlier? Come get some, buddy. Come get some. Oh, a bird's nest. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Let's bring it all the way out. Give it a few twists like that. Bring it all the way out. Get rid of all that shit. It's really not all that bad. It really isn't. It's disappointing at first, but it's really not a huge deal. The biggest deal is making sure all your line doesn't blow into you as you're trying to undo it. Yeah. Pull these all out. Give it a few twists with your thumb set on there. Get it out. There we go. Pull the line out here to make sure it doesn't tangle as it comes in. Done. Look at that. We're back to fishing. Really only took like 30 seconds. These are going to happen quite a bit when you first start, and it might be worth it to practice in your like backyard or something, or in the street with just a fake bait with no hooks on it, or just some weights on there or something. It's really, it ain't that bad burst nesting. Just takes a little bit of time. The worst is when you hook up a real big bait and you bird's nest and the big bait just snaps off your line. That's the worst part. So yeah, like I said, more breaking is better than less. And don't get intimidated by the feathering. There really isn't a whole lot to it. Once you've got your bait and line and everything down, you've casted it a few times, you really will not have to feather too much. It'll kind of become second nature on even doing it. Don't get discouraged. It can be really frustrating, but these low profile bait casters, they hold really well, they cast far, they look cool. They can handle bigger fish, they can handle bigger line, bigger baits. It's worth it. It's worth it. All right, time to hook up something else.